Brooklyn, New York resident Amanda Miner's 21st birthday celebration ended in tragedy in March of 2017 when she died in a horrific car crash on the Williamsburg Bridge at 3 in the morning. The speeding Infiniti G37 was being driven by off-duty NYPD traffic cop Stephen Hoyt, who lost control of the vehicle and struck a barrier, crashing with such force that the car was split in two upon impact. Miner was also severed in two as she was thrown from the sedan and into the opposite lanes, where emergency responders found her dead. At the time of the crash, Hoyt was driving more than 110 miles per hour in a 35 mile per hour zone. Before getting behind the wheel, he had consumed 8 shots of vodka and 2 cocktails. His blood alcohol content was well above the legal limit, and he was criminally charged for his role in the deadly accident. In early 2018, Hoyt pleaded guilty to second-degree manslaughter. In exchange for his pleas, he was sentenced to 4 to 12 years in prison, sparing him from the 15-year term that he was originally facing. Number 16. Zahaid Nassim. 29-year-old British marketing consultant Christina Abbots was never heard from again after sending her family a thank you text message for their birthday wishes in May of 2018. Just hours later, she was found bludgeoned to death in bed during a welfare check at the flat where she was living in Crowley, West Sussex. Abbott's friends had called the authorities when she failed to show up at her birthday celebration in London that evening. In the months leading up to her death, she had been house-sitting at the flat for a friend who was traveling. While responding to the scene, officers found a man pretending to be unconscious on the sofa. When he came to, he told paramedics that he had no idea what had happened. Later identified as a 48-year-old banker named Zahaid Nassim, Christina's loved ones had never heard of him, but they were also apparently unaware that she had been working as a high-end escort on the side and that Nassim had sought her services on the night of her death. Nassim was charged with murder and argued in court that he had acted in self-defense when Abbots tried to strangle him during a kinky game. The judge, Christine Lang, was unconvinced by this claim and admonished the defendant for the amount of pain and terror he inflicted on Abbots during her agonizing final moments. Lang also condemned Nassim for showing a complete lack of remorse for his actions. A jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to life with a minimum of 19 years. Number 15. Amusement park tragedy. An Ohio family was rocked by sudden tragedy in June of 2024 when 38-year-old Antonaro Billy Nelson was fatally struck by a roller coaster at the Kings Island amusement park in Mason. He had lost his keys on the ride known as the Banshee at around 8 o'clock in the evening and had hopped 2 barriers into a restricted area in an attempt to retrieve them. The coaster was traveling at around 70 miles per hour when it hit Nelson, who was airlifted to the emergency room and succumbed to his injuries several days later. Authorities released few details in the wake of the tragedy, and the amusement park remained equally tight-lipped in a statement about how it was focused on the welfare of Nelson and his family. The medical examiner who performed his autopsy ruled his causes of death as blunt force trauma to the head and traumatic brain injury. Nelson also suffered blunt force injuries to his body, which were listed on his autopsy report as contributing factors to his death. The Banshee was shut down for several days while an investigation was carried out and was reopened after state inspectors deemed it to be in satisfactory condition. According to reports, Nelson had told an employee about his lost keys and was told that they couldn't be retrieved until after the ride closed later that evening. A witness told investigators that Nelson was dressed similarly to the park's workers and had been mistaken by some as an employee as he wandered off into the off-limits area where he was killed. According to the most recent available updates, the investigation remains open as law enforcement awaits documents from various agencies that are involved in the case. Number 14. The murder of Laura Sinner. In March of 1998, 20-year-old Laura Sinner went camping with a group of friends on a nature reserve in Shasta County, California, unaware that she would never make it back home. She was joined by her ex-fiance's brother, Paul Gordon Smith Jr., who she had remained friends with even after the breakup, as well as Smith's teenage girlfriend, Amy Stevens, his half-sister Laurie Smith, and Laurie's boyfriend, Eric Rubio. Sinner's father, who lived out of state, contacted law enforcement the following month after he stopped hearing from his daughter. Police spoke with the young woman's ex-fiancé, Timothy Smith, who said that Sinner had been staying with his brother Paul, who he did not have a close relationship with. Her whereabouts remained a mystery until weeks later, when investigators received information suggesting that she had been killed by her friends. Police visited the group's abandoned campsite, which was littered with liquor bottles and debris. They found Sinner's murdered remains at the bottom of a fire pit, along with a bloody, dented family-sized can of chili beans. Her body and head were covered in cuts and blunt force injuries, revealing that she had been beaten and tortured to death. During the camping trip, Sinner was the only group member without a partner. She was oblivious to the fact that Amy had grown to resent her for flirting with Paul, and that the entire group had been talking about beating and possibly killing her for a week leading up to the getaway. Paul had responded favorably to the flirtation to ensure that they could use Sinner's car to reach the campsite while talking behind her back about how he wanted her dead. On the day of Sinner's murder, Amy and Laurie viciously attacked her. Amy would later admit that she and Laurie slammed Sinner's head into a tree and beat her with various objects as she cried and begged them to stop. Paul eventually joined in the assault, cutting Sinner with a razor blade and forcing her to expose her fresh wounds to an open flame. He forced the victim to drink liquor, tied a bag over her head, and bludgeoned her in the head until he heard a snapping sound. After killing Sinner, Paul threatened to hurt the rest of the group if they ever ratted on him. They all agreed to say that they had put Sinner on a Greyhound bus and never heard from her again if anyone ever questioned her whereabouts. All four suspects eventually confessed, and while their stories contained some conflicting details, it was clear that they had all participated in the murder on some level. Amy Stevens' case was handled in juvenile court due to her age, and she was released from custody in 2009 at the age of 25. Eric Rubio and Laurie Smith took plea deals and was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole in exchange for their testimony against Paul Smith, who was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. Paul was resentenced to life without parole after spending 13 years on death row, and Eric and Laurie were paroled in 2015 and 2021. Number 13. The Murder of Joe Melgoza. 30-year-old Joe Melgoza was murdered at his own wedding reception in December of 2019 after a pair of uninvited guests crashed the event. Police responded to the victim's sister-in-law's home in Chino, California at around 2:30 in the morning and found him clinging to life with blunt force trauma to the head. He was rushed to a nearby hospital where he died from his injuries. The party crashers, later identified as 28-year-old Ronnie Aristides Castaneda Ramirez and his brother, 19-year-old Josue Daniel Castaneda Ramirez, reportedly lived nearby and showed up after overhearing the celebration. They were seen dancing and socializing before being asked to leave since they weren't supposed to be there in the first place. The Castaneda brothers returned to the scene a short while later with baseball bats and bludgeoned Melgoza to death. Police arrested the pair later that day without incident and booked them into custody on suspicion of murder and other charges. Josue Castaneda denied being present at the reception, but police found a photo booth picture of him, Ronnie, and a female guest, which proved otherwise. Investigators also connected the suspects to the crime through Snapchat posts. In March of 2023, a jury found the brothers guilty of second-degree murder and assault with a deadly weapon. They were both sentenced to 15 years to life on the murder charge, plus 3 years for the assault charge with credit for time served. Number 12. The Murder of Estrella Carrera. 26-year-old newlywed Estrella Carrera had exchanged vows with her husband just hours earlier and was still wearing her wedding reception dress when she was viciously stabbed to death by her groom. The accused killer, Arnaldo Jimenez, was long gone by the time police discovered Carrera's murdered body in a bathtub at the couple's Chicago home. He has been on the run ever since. Investigators believe that Carrera and Jimenez got into an argument during the drive home after tying the knot at City Hall and celebrating with family and friends. According to the FBI, Jimenez most likely stabbed Carrera in his Maserati before dragging her body inside. Carrera's family called the police and requested a welfare check when she failed to pick her children up from a relative's house. Officers paid a visit to the young woman's home where they found her dead. The FBI added Jimenez to its 10 most wanted fugitives list in 2019, where he remains to this day. A $250,000 reward is being offered for information leading to his whereabouts. Number 11. Marcella Chittister. A birthday party in Monroe County, Michigan, took a tragic turn on a Saturday afternoon in April of 2024 when an SUV crashed into the Swan Boat Club in Berlin Township at high speed. A pair of young siblings died and a dozen other partygoers were injured, including their mother, Mariah Dodds, who suffered a collapsed lung, broken ribs, cuts, and bruises. The driver, 66-year-old Marcella Chittister, was charged with 8 criminal counts, including 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of operating while intoxicated causing death, and 4 counts of operating while intoxicated causing serious injury. According to law enforcement, her blood alcohol content was more than twice the legal limit at the time of the crash. Prosecutors accused Chittister of having a history of substance abuse, while her defense attorney claimed that she had drunk a single glass of wine before the deadly crash. Chittister's lawyer also argued that his client did not deserve to be charged with second-degree murder because she did not intend to kill anyone. In her first and only interview since her arrest, Chittister told local station WXYZ that she believed she had a seizure while driving. She claimed to have no memory of the moments leading up to the accident and that it had been her first time driving in several months after health issues had prevented her from getting behind the wheel. After listening to arguments from both sides, the judge bound the case over for trial. The outcome remains to be seen. In the meantime, Dodds and several other people who were injured in the crash are in the process of suing Chittister, the tavern she visited prior to the crash, and the boat club. Number 10. Arishane McTeer. 26-year-old Arishane McTeer was walking down Interstate 10 in Jacksonville, Florida, after celebrating her birthday in June of 2022 when she was struck by 2 cars. She died from her injuries at the scene. Both of the drivers who struck McTeer were cleared of any wrongdoing, but her loved ones were baffled about why she was wandering down a highway at 3 a.m. after traveling to the area from Georgia with her girlfriends. She had recently graduated college and was starting a career in the medical field when her life was abruptly cut short. In the aftermath of the tragedy, McTeer's family told News 4 JAX that they had been unable to reach the friends that Arishane had gone out with on the night of her death. At a loss for an understanding of the circumstances that led up to her death, they said they were grateful toward the people who dialed 911 and stayed by the young woman during her final moments. McTeer's loved ones were no closer to finding answers 3 months later when the police announced that they had no updates on the situation and that the investigation was ongoing. Much to the family's frustration, her friends still hadn't been questioned by investigators. Updates have not been forthcoming, leaving the outcome of the case unclear. Number 9. The murder of Robert Abdelkader III. A California man was killed and 5 other victims were injured in June of 2024 when a gunman opened fire on a pool party in Compton. 28-year-old business owner Robert Abdelkader III was pronounced dead at the scene, and the surviving victims were taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening gunshot wounds. In the meantime, the suspects fled down a nearby alleyway. Abdelkader was shot while catering the party. which had somewhere between 200 and 300 guests in attendance. Visitors fled in all directions as the gunshots rang out, knocking all the outdoor furniture over as they scrambled for safety. Responding officers searched the debris-strewn property for evidence and attempted to identify the suspects, but their efforts were unsuccessful. Investigators believe that there are witnesses capable of naming the perpetrators and are hoping that someone will come forward and share what they know. A $20,000 reward is being offered for information leading to the capture of the individuals responsible for Abdul Qadir's death, but the case remains unsolved for now. Number 8. The murder of Julio Fulio. Florida rapper Charles Jones, better known by his stage name Julio Fulio, was murdered just 2 days after his 26th birthday in June of 2024 when he was ambushed outside a Holiday Inn in Tampa. He was shot dead in the parking lot and 3 other victims were injured after a trio of gunmen opened fire on his group. Jones had gone to the hotel after being kicked out of an Airbnb where he had thrown himself a pool party that got a little too rowdy. He was a known member of the Jacksonville-based KTA gang, which was entangled in long-standing feuds with several other gangs at the time of the rapper's murder. Jones had survived a previous attempt on his life at his recording studio 3 years earlier in 2021 when he was grazed by a bullet. Back in 2018, his cousin and 3 others were murdered during a shooting at his brother's birthday party. 4 suspects have been arrested in connection with Jones's death. 30-year-old Rashad Murphy, 21-year-old Alicia Andrews, 21-year-old Isaiah Chase, and 18-year-old Sean Gathright are facing felony murder charges, and a warrant has been issued for a 5th suspect, 27-year-old Davian Murphy. The outcome of the case remains to be seen. Number 7. Trolling the dead. A shamanic medicine woman named Danny Whitaker fatally overdosed on drugs while celebrating her 40th birthday on Australia's Gold Coast in late March of 2024. She went into cardiac arrest late at night after she and a group of 6 girlfriends took a highly potent mixture of substances while partying at a high-rise luxury apartment in Surfers Bay. Whitaker died at the scene despite emergency responders' best efforts to save her, and 2 of her friends were admitted to the hospital, including 1 woman who arrived at the emergency room in critical condition. While searching the apartment, police found evidence of several different types of drugs, including cannabis residue, ketamine, and psychedelic mushrooms. While it was unclear what caused the overdose, it was apparent that the women had most likely gotten sick from indulging in a cocktail of party favors. Following the tragedy, online trolls flooded social media with heartless comments about the nature of her death. Whitaker became the target of thousands of judgmental and cruel posts from people who mocked her for taking drugs while arguably being old enough to know better. Many of the trolls filled their comments with laughing emojis and plainly stated that they had no sympathy for drug users, while others accused the women of being immature and stupid. Several people remarked about how it would have made more sense for the partiers to stick to alcohol and more traditional drugs, with one person writing, "A line or 5 of coke and some bubbles is more than enough." Whitaker's friends and family came to her defense, condemning the trolls for their insensitive and callous commentary. They admonished the haters for judging someone they didn't even know, and highlighted all of the ways Whitaker had enriched their lives during her time on Earth. According to the most recent available updates, the investigation into the circumstances surrounding Whitaker's death is ongoing, as police await toxicology test results on the drugs they collected at the scene. Number 6. The murder of Gladis Rickart. 39-year-old Gladis Rickart was about to leave her Ridgefield, New Jersey home for her wedding in September of 1999 when her ex-boyfriend entered the residence and shot her dead in front of her family and friends. The horrific act of violence was captured on video as Rickart handed flower bouquets to her bridesmaids during what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Rickart's brother immediately sprang into action, yanking the murder weapon out of the shooter's hands and holding him at gunpoint until law enforcement arrived. In the meantime, complete chaos descended upon the residents as guests ducked for cover, scrambled into the basement, ran outside, and fled to neighbors' houses in fear for their lives. The killer, 47-year-old businessman Agustin Garcia, was arrested at the scene. Garcia and Rickart had broken up about 9 months earlier after dating for 6 years, and Rickart wanted no contact with her ex. He clearly didn't take the rejection well, and Rickart's relatives later told reporters that the family had worried that something terrible might happen. Just a week before the wedding, Garcia had left 100 roses in Rickart's lawn, indicating an unwillingness to move on from the relationship despite Rickart's desire to be left alone. His defense attorneys told a much different tale during his sentencing hearing after he was found guilty of murder, claiming that their client was a stand-up citizen who had killed Rickart during a jealous rage. They blamed the defendant's actions on a 5-second lapse in judgment while describing him as somebody who played by the rules. Unswayed by the claims, Judge William Meehan said that he did not consider Rickart's murder a 5-second event. He described Garcia's actions as obsession and stalking before imposing a life sentence with a minimum of 30 years behind bars. After delivering a rambling apology filled with biblical citations and proclamations of love for Rickart's family, he stared straight ahead and appeared almost emotionless while his punishment was announced. Garcia has appealed his sentence 5 times, with his most recent attempt for post-conviction relief being denied in 2024. He remains incarcerated in the New Jersey state prison system for the foreseeable future. Number 5. Chaos at Yellowstone National Park. A vacation to America's iconic Yellowstone National Park took an unexpectedly terrifying turn for a group of 5 tourists in July of 2024 when their car crashed into one of the park's famous thermal geysers. The accident occurred shortly before 11 o'clock in the morning when the person behind the wheel accidentally drove into the semi-centennial geyser near Roaring Mountain. According to the National Park Service, the semi-centennial geyser's water is both acidic and hot, with surface temperatures ranging around 105 degrees Fahrenheit. The vehicle became fully submerged in 9 feet of water, but all of the car's occupants managed to escape. They were taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries, and the roadway was closed for 2 hours while authorities investigated the incident and removed the car from the geyser. Park officials released limited details following the accident, citing an ongoing investigation. The circumstances leading up to the crash have yet to be revealed. Additional chaos befell upon the park just days later when a hydrothermal explosion occurred at Black Diamond Pool in Biscuit Basin. The blast, which resulted from water suddenly turning into steam, caused heavy damage to a wooden walkway and sent debris flying hundreds of feet into the air. Dramatic footage showed panicked tourists fleeing as a plume of black smoke spewed toward the sky. Thankfully, no one was injured, but the incident prompted park officials to close Biscuit Basin to the public for the remainder of the summer. Number 4. The murders of Tayasia Manning and Felicia Council. 2 women were killed and at least 5 other people were injured in July of 2024 after gunfire broke out at Maplewood Park in Rochester, New York in broad daylight. The park was filled with hundreds of visitors when the shooting occurred, causing guests to disperse in all directions as they scrambled for safety. 25-year-old city employee Tayasia Manning and 34-year-old event planner Felicia Council died from their injuries while the surviving victims were treated for their wounds. Police Chief David Smith confirmed that authorities were searching for more than one shooter, but no arrests have been made thus far. The senseless tragedy has re-energized the fight against gun violence in the upstate city while detectives continue working to identify the culprits and bring them to justice. Number 3. The murder of Caleb Turner. Complete chaos broke out during a large house party in Nashville, North Carolina. During the early morning hours, One day in August of 2024, when a gunman opened fire on the gathering, emergency responders found 21-year-old Caleb Turner clinging to life with multiple gunshot wounds and did everything in their power to resuscitate him, but he died from his injuries at the scene. According to investigators, the young man had been shot with his own stolen gun during an attempted robbery after being approached by 3 suspects. 20-year-old Elijah Battle, 20-year-old Yasun Powell, and an unnamed teenager are facing charges of first-degree murder and armed robbery. According to the most recent available updates, all 3 defendants remain held without bail as they await their next court date. Today's topic was requested by RoboSock380 and Deshaun Marquist. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Francisco Gonzalez. 32-year-old newlywed groom Francisco Gonzalez and his bride Dulce were celebrating their nuptials during a backyard reception at 1 in the morning in June of 2024 when a pair of masked gunmen shot him in the head. The armed robbers intruded upon the ceremony outside the victim's St. Louis, Missouri home and were going through his pockets when the shooter pulled the trigger. A relative told reporters that the gunman may have thought that Gonzalez was trying to reach for a weapon when he was actually reaching for his wallet. Gonzalez was rushed to the hospital in critical condition and was fighting for his life according to the most recent available updates on the case. He and Dulce, who have 2 children, had just tied the knot after spending more than a decade together. The suspects fled the scene and remain at large, leaving the victims' loved ones terrified to leave their house and go about their daily lives. The investigation is reportedly ongoing, but there have been no updates on the case since shortly after the story broke. If you're still hungry for more intriguing crime stories, stay tuned till after number 1 because we've got When Chefs Go Wrong coming right up. Number 1. Jesse McFadden. An innocent slumber party took a horrifying turn in May of 2023 when 35-year-old mother of 3 Holly Guess, her teenage children, Riley Elizabeth Allen and Michael James Mayo, and 2 of their friends, Ivy Webster and Brittany Brewer, were shot dead in cold blood. Police also found the body of Guess's husband, 39-year-old Jesse McFadden, who was identified. The teenagers all lived near each other and had gotten together for sleepovers numerous times since the Guess family had moved in 2 years earlier, leaving it unclear why McFadden decided to murder everyone. Unbeknownst to the visiting friend's parents, he was a convicted predator who had recently been released from prison after serving 17 years and was also in the midst of an ongoing case relating to his perverted behavior. Ivy Webster's father, Justin, told News Nation that he and his wife, Ashley, thought McFadden was a little weird, but that they didn't really know much about him. The couple felt comfortable letting their daughter visit the Guest family's home where several members of her friend group regularly hung out. In hindsight, Justin and Ashley said that Holly Guest should have told them about her husband's past, which they had no knowledge of. One potential clue to McFadden's motive was the fact that he was scheduled to go to trial for his latest batch of alleged crimes a few days after the massacre. Whatever his reasons were, he took them to the grave, and it may never be clear what he was thinking when he made the fateful decision to take 6 innocent lives. Number 8. Juan Carlos Cruz. The Santa Monica Police Department in California was informed in the spring of 2010 that a local homeless man had been solicited to kill someone by former Food Network chef Juan Carlos Cruz. A week-long undercover operation was subsequently launched, which led to the arrest of 48-year-old Cruz on May the 13th. Investigators discovered that the Dominican-American television chef had attempted to orchestrate a murder-for-hire plot that targeted his wife, Jennifer Campbell. Cruz allegedly approached a total of 3 homeless individuals with the sinister proposition, requesting that they either slit Campbell's throat or fatally strangle her, in exchange for $1,000. Further reports detailed how he'd even given one of the men the security code to his apartment in order to facilitate carrying out the murder. Following his arrest, Cruz's bail was set at $5 million, although it was later lowered to $2 million. During the course of the police's investigation into the matter, detectives uncovered Cruz's motivation for wanting to have his wife killed. The couple had been unable to bear a child due to fertility issues and had fruitlessly spent around $200,000 on medical treatments. Campbell had consequently fallen into a deep depression, and Cruz allegedly felt that killing her would have been a merciful way of ending the emotional suffering she'd been experiencing. In December of 2010, the chef pleaded no contest to a charge of murder for hire. As part of a plea agreement, he was ordered to pay $1,870 in restitution and serve 9 years in federal prison. Number 7. John Croucher. On October the 8th of 2018, the Holy Trinity Church congregation went to the Crew Arms pub in the Northamptonshire village of Hinton in the Hedges for a harvest dinner. Following the meal, during which 32 people had reportedly eaten the restaurant's shepherd's pie, an elderly parishioner named Elizabeth Neumann became violently ill. The 92-year-old ultimately died of gastrointestinal bleeding induced by repeated vomiting. The 31 others who had the shepherd's pie suffered unpleasant bouts of food poisoning themselves. An investigation into the incident led the authorities to determine that the pub's head chef, John Croucher, hadn't properly prepared the minced meat used in the shepherd's pie that evening. Court documents detailed how the 40-year-old had placed the meat in the fridge overnight after not cooking it adequately. He then cooked it again the following day and neglected to take its temperature before serving it to the churchgoers. The chef was arrested and charged with contravening food regulations, and following a trial at Reading Crown Court, was given a 4-month suspended jail sentence. Croucher publicly expressed his remorse in the wake of his sentencing, claiming that the horrible circumstance had made him a better chef. Number 6. Cat Cora. Shortly after 6 p.m. on June the 17th of 2012, police in Santa Barbara, California, were called to the scene of a minor traffic accident that had resulted from a female motorist rear-ending another vehicle. Upon their arrival, the officers identified the driver responsible for the crash as celebrity chef Cat Cora. She had previously been featured as an Iron Chef on the show Iron Chef America and as a co-host of the reality competition series Around the World in 80 Plates. Law enforcement quickly became suspicious that Cora might have been under the influence of alcohol at the time of the collision. After questioning the chef, she admitted to having had 3 beers at the Cold Spring Tavern earlier that night. Cora subsequently submitted to a breathalyzer test which indicated that her blood alcohol content was 0.20, more than twice the legal driving limit. The officers placed her under arrest and she was taken to Santa Barbara's sobering house, a facility where cooperative individuals arrested for a DUI are allowed to sober up before being released. Cora ultimately pleaded no contest to a charge of driving under the influence and was consequently sentenced to 120 days in jail, followed by 3 years of probation. Number 5. Sarah Horowitz. Prominent Texas chef Sarah Horowitz, who appeared on the reality television series Hell's Kitchen and Best in Smoke, was taken into police custody on April the 10th of 2013, according to an arrest affidavit. Horowitz and her boyfriend, El Paso weatherman Mark Mathis, had just returned home from a trip to Austin when they became embroiled in a heated argument. As tensions escalated, Horowitz allegedly grabbed a cooler full of food and dumped its contents all over the inside of their vehicle. As was later reported to investigators, the TV chef then unleashed a barrage of punches and kicks on Mathis, who consequently sustained several cuts to his face and bruising behind his ear. Horowitz, whom several media outlets identified as singer Justin Bieber's personal chef, was initially arrested in connection to the domestic violence incident. However, her boyfriend ultimately declined to press charges and she was released. Number 4. Michael Chiarello. In the early morning hours of November the 2nd of 2016, celebrity chef Michael Chiarello was pulled over by law enforcement in Napa County, California. The television host and cookbook author had been driving his Porsche home from Bottega Ristorante, one of his 2 California restaurants. When the traffic stop was initiated, Chiarello was reportedly arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence and possession of a controlled substance, before being released on $5,000 bail a few hours later. A statement was subsequently released on Chiarello's behalf in which he announced his intentions to vigorously challenge the misdemeanor charges being levied against him. 8 months earlier, in March of 2016, a pair of lawsuits had been filed against the chef and his restaurant group, Grupo Kiarello, alleging harassment and labor law violations. The lawsuits, which were litigated by two of Chiarello's former employees, accused him of fostering a hostile and abusive environment in his restaurants. The harassment lawsuit had been settled for an undisclosed amount only 2 days prior to Chiarello's DUI arrest. Number 3. Carol Kochinsky. Gluten-free chef Carol Kochinsky first rose to prominence in 2009 when she began doing cooking segments on the WFLA Tampa Bay's daytime television show. A few years later, Kochinsky launched the national lifestyle magazine Simply Gluten-Free, which compiled pieces by gluten and allergen-free writers as well as medical doctors. In 2018, the nationally syndicated TV chef furthered her lifestyle brand with a line of gluten-free mineral makeup called Beauté Minerals. Kochinsky's prominence turned to controversy in February of 2022 when she and her partner, John Hennigan, were arrested at their home in Dunedin, Florida. It subsequently emerged that the couple was being charged in connection to their alleged involvement in the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January the 6th of 2021. Court records indicated that the FBI had found GPS tracking data from a mobile device that placed Kochinsky and Hennigan in the Capitol building on the day of the insurrection. The couple was also reportedly captured on surveillance video walking through the Capitol's hallways and in the rotunda. Upon being taken into custody, they were charged with 4 federal offenses, including entering and remaining in a restricted building or grounds. In the immediate aftermath of Kochinsky's arrest, all references to her were removed from the Simply Gluten-Free website. Number 2. Carmelo Kiara Monte. In September of 2019, the BBC reported that Italian law enforcement officials had arrested Sicilian TV chef Carmelo Kiara Monte on suspicion of drug trafficking. According to local newspaper La Sicilia, the police had found 2 6.5-foot-tall marijuana plants and more than a pound of Indian hemp at the chef's Trescatani residence. They also reportedly seized cannabis-infused wine, olives, coffee, and tuna from the home. Although the authorities accused 50-year-old Kiara Monte of possessing the substances with the intent of distributing them, he initially disputed his charges. He claimed to have actually been using the drugs in experiments as part of an effort to research new flavors. It was later reported that Kiara Monte, who described himself as an agro-food consultant for Third Millennium Cuisine, had been released from custody pending the commencement of his criminal trial. Number 1. Mel Galis. New York restaurateur Mel Galis was the owner and co-founder of 2 popular raw vegan food establishments, one of which was called Pure Food and Wine and the other One Lucky Duck, located in Manhattan's Gramercy Park neighborhood. The former had been twice listed on New York Magazine's list of top 100 restaurants. Mel Galis amassed a considerable social media following as her business ventures continued to grow, and her burgeoning success led to her making multiple television appearances. She also attracted the attention of celebrity customers such as Tom Brady and Chelsea Clinton. In January of 2015, Mel Galis's business became the focus of controversy when her restaurant staff walked out en masse after not being paid a month's worth of wages. It marked the second time within a year that wages had been withheld from the staff, and due to a lack of active workers, both restaurants had to be temporarily closed. Although they eventually reopened in April of 2015, their staff walked out yet again due to unpaid wages, and the establishments were then permanently shut down. It subsequently emerged that the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office had been investigating Mel Galis on suspicion of stealing more than $2 million from her business's investors. She and her husband, Anthony Strangis, became fugitives from justice in May of 2015. The couple were eventually tracked down to a hotel in Sevierville, Tennessee, where they were taken into police custody on fraud and theft charges. In the wake of their arrests, it was reported that Mel Galis had defrauded her investors and refused to pay her employees at the behest of her husband. Strangers had reportedly convinced her that he'd make her dog immortal if she did as he requested. The New York City chef ultimately pleaded guilty to charges of grand larceny, criminal tax fraud, scheme to defraud, and violation of labor laws, and was consequently jailed for about 4 months. She filed for divorce from Strangers in May of 2018. The unusual scandal associated with Mel Galis's case was documented in a Netflix series titled Bad Vegan: Fame, Fraud, Fugitives, which was released in March of 2022. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be given a $10,000 birthday party budget for the next 50 years or have a single $1 million party thrown for your next birthday? Let us know in the comments section below.